Hey guys, we're going to do something a little different here today. We're here with our friend Neil Pope, and he and his wife Dawn are in Oklahoma, and they own Nomad Neil RV Services. We've had so many of you ask questions about our solar setup and off-grid living. We thought this would be a good time to talk to Neil and get some answers on off-grid RV services. So as I said, Neil and Don are very good friends of ours. We've known them for a bunch of years.
I think we're going on 4 now.
Well, our friendship has been a lot longer than
Technically
that.
5, yeah, 4,
Probably
almost 5,
6.
maybe 6, yeah.
Yeah.
Has it really been that long?
It has.
Man, time flies when you're having fun.
We met them here at Rolling Retreats, probably about 6 years ago. I haven't run the numbers, but that's probably about right. And we got together, we kind of hit it off, and we've been traveling off and on together ever since, haven't we?
We have actually. We've been traveling together literally ever since.
Yeah.
In fact, my very first beginning to the beginning to a start of my first solar installation, you assisted me with. So technically, this is all your fault.
But I didn't cost you money. Oh, I did, didn't I?
You did cost me money. So if anybody hasn't already heard, knowing Jim will cost you money. Now Jim says knowing Neil will cost him.
That is true.
So it works back and forth. But anyway, so yeah, I think it was 4 years ago, roughly, that we did that installation, and it was in our own RV, my wife Dawn and I, and I had never gone down that particular road. I mean, I have history in electrical and plumbing and all that sort of stuff when it comes to residential, but I had never really done anything RV related, which is kind of ironic because at that time, the RV that I was putting my first system into was actually Dawn and I's 6th RV, but we had never really done any kind of boondocking. Everything we'd always done, I'll refer to us as pedestal princesses because we were always plugged in. So after having spent several weeks with Jim and him saying, you should come to Quartzsite with us, but there's nowhere to plug in. And I said, well, I'm intrigued. Tell me about Quartzsite. So that's the short version. As far as the introduction to why it is that I ended up having to build this full system in my rig. But Jim assisted me with that. And we spent, I think, 2 days in putting in batteries and an inverter. Did we do 2 the first time, or was it just 1? I don't remember.
So let me tell you how this all started. Is Neil called me and he said, we'd like to go to Quartzsite with you. And I said, but you've never boondocked. And he said, no, you're right, we haven't. And then he called me a few days later and said, guess what I got the other day? And I said, what's that? And he said, I found some Battle-Born batteries blemmed on a Black Friday sale, and Don let me buy it.
I sure did.
You remember that?
I do remember. I do remember. In fact, my wife said at the time, if I remember this part correctly, she says, are you really sure that you want to spend this much money on batteries? And I said, well, if we're going to do what Jim does, we're going to have to. So we purchased 6 batteries in the beginning. And then, of course, I needed an inverter, or otherwise the batteries were, of no use. So then I didn't know what I was doing. And Jim had already done his own installation on his DRV. And so Jim says, well, I tell you what, we'll meet in Orlando because we were both going to be in that area for that particular time of year before going to Quartzsite. And he says, meet me in Orlando and I will help you with your system. And he showed up with the tools and the knowledge, and I showed up with all of the stuff.
And want.
And yes, and a need. Yes, so
I'm gonna fast forward on this story. They followed us out to Quartzsite that year. They had never boondocked before. He had his 6 new batteries. He had his 3,000 watt inverter, and
no solar.
And no solar, and they were excited.
We were.
And And someday, if you guys are interested, I'll go into detail on this story, but they ended up staying in Quartzsite for 3 months
We sure did.
with 6 batteries, an inverter, and no solar. And I'll tell you the history on that if you're interested. But fast forward now,
Okay.
and Neil met another friend of ours, Chad Heiser, and Chad was doing solar installations. And so Neil asked Chad if he could go be his gopher, for lack of a better term.
Yes. More or less. Yes.
And so he went up to Chad's place in Northern California, spent quite a bit of time up there learning and asking questions and learning and asking questions. You learned a lot, didn't you?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit further. Neil has done solar installations, battery solar inverters, off-grid systems on the road for a few years. And that has proved to be not as desirable of a work area as you would like. And so they finally had the opportunity, they found the opportunity. You know, it's interesting because God knows what we need, right?
Absolutely.
And they were at the point of, oh my gosh, we're getting bigger, we've got more business, but we're traveling all over the country. Because Neil would go to the customer,
I would.
you know, for lack of a better term, right? And that was getting expensive. And so, long story short, Rolling Retreats moved out of their existing facility. They purchased a larger piece of land and a larger, with 9 bays. Their old setup here in Elk City, Oklahoma, became available. And Neil and Don, after a lot of long talks and prayer, decided to commit to this. And it gave you a beautiful 2-bay shop with a lot of storage. You've got a lot of tools available. You've got a nice concrete floor. It's semi-warm in the winter, and you can kind of cool it down in the summer. And it gives you a place out of the weather. And he does other services as well, let me tell you that. So Neil's had a number of years of experience on off-grid, and I have to tell you, whenever we go someplace, he doesn't even plug in.
Nope.
Their system is so robust that they don't even have to plug in. They have since upgraded their system. He's gone with dual inverters. He's gone with a bigger battery bank. He's gone with a ton of solar on his roof. And what I told him his logo should say on his business is, when you want it done right the first time. So when he puts a system together, he does it right the first time.
Well, I don't want to toot a horn, but I do take pride in my work. And I mean, I've been doing this now for 3 years. And in those 3 years, I haven't had a customer come back because of a problem, but I've had most of them come back because they always want more.
And we're going to get a little bit more into detail on that here in just a second. But before we get too far, I just want to talk to him about, because we're getting a lot of questions from you guys. You know, I have solar, I have a couple of panels, I have, you know, I have this, I have that. And it's hard for us to talk to you because we don't know your wants, we don't know your lifestyle, we don't know what your end goal is going to be. But I have to say that what I told Neil a number of years ago when he first was asking, I said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I told him the number one thing you want to upgrade is your batteries. The batteries that come in your RV, the manufacturers and the dealers, they just put a basic battery lead cell in there and say, see ya. And then if you're running a harvest host, going from point A to point B, and you do a harvest host and you run your furnace at night, you wake up in the morning with dead batteries usually. And so I've always told people your number one is your batteries, and lithium prices have come down immensely.
Absolutely. And as Jim was just saying, that's absolutely correct. Your batteries are your most important thing if you're going to do any kind of overnight RVing where you're not plugging in. Everybody comes at me with a a different frame of mind, but they all eventually end up in the same place. Uh, the most important question that you can ask yourself if you're going to be boondocking, dry camping, staying overnight without being plugged in is, what do you want your rig to be able to do for you that it can't do for you right now? So a lot of folks will say, well, I don't really want a whole lot. I just want to be able to run one air conditioner. So that's an oxymoron.
I'm not laughing at people, guys. I'm just, it is a common phrase.
It's due to a lack of knowledge, and it's nobody's fault except, well, I should say it's actually probably the fault of the dealerships that are selling rigs that don't know themselves, so they don't know how to educate the customer. They just sell the rig to the customer, and whatever is in it is what you get. And you might be perfectly happy with what you've received, but if you want it to do more, you don't know any better until you start doing your own research. And if you don't understand how the systems work, like I didn't 5 years ago, then you don't really know where to start. Had I not met Jim, I would have not known that batteries are your most important thing, because, and the way I like to explain it to my customers is that the batteries in your system is your foundation. And that is what you can build your system on top of. So then you have your, whatever's powering your system, so your inverters. And then you have solar on the roof. Now the purpose of these three things is, your inverter is what's going to power your coach, or in my case, dual inverters, or in other people's cases. So your inverter's power, what is basically how much can I run in the coach at any particular time while I'm not plugged in.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? For those of you that aren't familiar with the terms, the inverter actually inverts your 12 volts out of your batteries into 110 power, which is your wall socket and your sticks and bricks. And that 110 is where your microwave is. That's where your light, well, no, your microwave, your air conditioners, anything that is plugged in to 110, if it doesn't work when you're plugged into a pedestal, the inverter, as long as it's big enough to handle the load, will take the 12 volts from the batteries, convert them to 110.
It's converting it to AC power,
Yeah.
which is what's coming from the pedestal.
Yep.
So if you're plugged into a pedestal, that's where your AC power is coming from. And unless your coach is already equipped with an inverter, but in most cases, direct from a dealership, your inverter is not going to be one that is designed to handle the load of the entire coach. If you're lucky, you'll have a larger inverter that's powering a sub-panel. But what that means is that it's taking power from your batteries, whether it's 12, 24, 48 voltage, doesn't matter, but it's DC current. So what it's doing is it's taking the power from the batteries, and then it's inverting that into AC current, like Jim was saying, microwave, dishwasher, air conditioners, things like that. TV, all your electrical outlets inside your coach. But like I said, if you're plugging in, then that's where all that power is coming from. If you're not plugged in, then you're not going to have all of those circuits already wired from the dealership. So then that means that you're going to need to basically have two things. You're going to have to rewire the coach so that an inverter can power all of the outlets and appliances inside of the coach. And then you're also going to need an inverter that has the ability to run all of those things. Now, the battery, or your battery bank, that is what determines how long you can run these things inside of your coach. And then finally, the solar that you have on the roof, that is what is putting the power or energy back into your battery bank. So what I like to ask my customers after I say, so what do you want your rig to be able to do for you in the future that it doesn't do for you right now? And I get the answer to that question, and I explain the three levels of the system. Then I I say, so how long do you want to be able to do these things? And they always say, well, I want to be able to, just a few days, I want to be able to stay unplugged. And what I then like to educate people with is that you really only need to be able to get through a 24-hour period. And the reason that is because if my batteries are at 100% at just before dark today, and then I have to factor in all of the draws, all of the things that we're running inside of our coach.
Maybe running the microwave for a little while, heating up dinner,
TV,
watching TV as
overnight,
entertainment.
doing laundry, any of those things that you want to be able to have, those amenities, if you will, that you're accustomed to being able to use overnight. All of that is going to be draining your battery bank. So then in the morning, as the sun comes up, now your solar on the roof is going to be able to put power or energy back into your batteries. And what you want, the goal to be, is for you to get back to 100% on your state of charge for your batteries at just before dark the next day. So if you can do that, then that is the size of the system that you need, if that makes sense. So basically, the size of the system is going to be determined by how much of a draw are you personally going to create on your own system. And no two rigs or systems are identical.
And let me throw a little wrench into this for you guys that are now got your wheels turning up here. And Neil and I have talked about this quite extensively. What inevitably happens is I, as a customer, say, I just want to be able to get through a harvest host night, have it recharged for the next day, maybe do a second harvest host, and then get down the road into an RV park and I'll plug in. What inevitably happens is what happened to him and what happened to me and Kelly is that once we get a taste of, oh my gosh, I can turn the TV on, I can run the microwave. In some cases, I can run an AC for a short period of time. Wouldn't it be cool to do this for 2 weeks at a time? And that's where you're hooked, isn't it?
It is. And a lot of people don't want to stay unplugged for that long. And in fact, most RVers' lifestyles lead them from pedestal to pedestal. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't be different than that right now myself had it not been for the invite to Quartzsite. And once I got into a location that I could sit at length for very inexpensive costs, and hang out with my friends and have a good time, but you don't have a pedestal to plug into. So at that point, that was their whole want on my part. I wanted to be able to go hang out in Quartzsite with Jim and Kelly. And at that time, they're the only two people that we knew that went to Quartzsite. Now we have an entire family of friends that we hang out with in Quartzsite.
It's true.
And all of these people have these systems, and we're always adding on. And it's so that we can stay a little longer or run a few more things. So, or add a few more panels because we found a blank spot on the roof.
And that's a great segue into our next discussion. But my question for Neil is, how many customers, on average, percentage-wise, not numbers, but percentage-wise, how many customers do you build a system based on their wants/needs? And then they say, okay, great, thank you very much. And they go down the road, and then they call you 6 months later or 12 months later and say, ha, you were right. I'm looking for more.
I'm going to say that I have 50% of my customers that in the beginning, in the initial installation, they believe that they need A as far as a level. And then as they're having that processes and everything, those thoughts going through the minds of, do I really need this much stuff to build a system, if you will? And they try to analyze that without having the knowledge or experience yet of actually doing the boondocking. So they say, all right, I want half the battery bank size. I only need one inverter, and I might just, I just want to be able to run one air conditioner. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's actually the most popular, and that's why I say 50%. But that 50% then goes out, experiences what they are now able to do. But then they start to realize, well, what if we could do a little bit longer? So then they think, well, I need more batteries. And I might like to run another air conditioner. So I'm going to need another inverter. But if I've got more batteries, then am I going to need more solar so that I can charge those batteries? So we're back to now we're putting more equipment in. So I refer to that as the repeat customer. 25% of my customer base are ones that there's no question. They come in here and they say, look, I'm not going to come in 2, 3 more times. Let's just do it all right now. Whatever I've got room for, I want to be able to run everything in my coach. Let's build that system. And the remaining 25%, they're not coming in for a full system build. They're coming in for, I just want to upgrade my batteries, or I just want to have you change out my inverter, rewire my coach to a whole house system, something like that. So now that's, of course, just the percentage of customers that's power related, if you will.
So the reason we're discussing this in a little more detail is those return customers that come back. And this is for those of you that are thinking of systems. Neil or Chad, either one, that do these installations will give you here's what you're asking for, here's the cost. Now, might I suggest in the future, you may want to upgrade and go to a little more robust system. If we do that today, your hardware will cost you a little bit of money, but the labor is going to be roughly the same. And if you decide 6 months or 12 months down the road that you want to come back and upgrade that system, you're going to have to pay my labor costs again for a second time, as well as the hardware upgrades.
Very true.
So if you are thinking of an off-grid system, whether it be a single night or a 2-night stay at a Harvest Host or something of that nature, just keep in mind that if you do want to upgrade, the first time coming in is usually the best. Is that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to have to go back into the shop more than one time if they can keep from it. But yes, I mean, we recommend to everybody that obviously it's going to make more sense and it's easier just to go ahead and do everything in the beginning rather than having to come back and change things or move things when necessary. But I mean, when I do a system installation the first time, I always try to, because of 50% of my customers come back, I always try to leave room for those additions to happen later, so that way I'm not having to take out what I've put in. But as Jim was just saying, it's roughly the same amount of labor time if we do 2 inverters instead of 1 inverter. I mean, I'm literally just hanging a second one on the wall. The wiring is just one more set of wires, but I'm still pulling the same wire. But if we have to do it a second time, then you're coming back into the shop and then you're having to pay me almost as much the second time around just to be able to do that again. Now, technically, it's not almost the same in the factor of the whole build, because the initial part of the build is going to be the most expensive no matter what, because you've got to buy the basic part of the equipment and then you're paying the labor time to get that installation complete. Now, it's still less expensive for the other stages if you add than it is that initial trip. So we can come back and add a second inverter and have all of that stuff done in a day. If you add second batteries, or additional batteries to your battery bank, again, in most cases, that's just going to be for a day. So you're paying a day's worth of labor instead of a week's worth of labor. Because when we do a full system installation, plan on being here 5 days.
Okay, so I don't want to get too much into a commercial, if you will, guys. We've had this discussion, when I asked him if he would be interested in answering some questions that we get from you. But I do want to ask about the equipment that you install.
Okay.
Namely the suite, if you will, the Victron suite.
Okay.
Why did you choose Victron? Why is that your preference?
Well, honestly, I think more Victron chose me in the very beginning. I had no experience with any of the equipment. If you remember a little bit ago, we were discussing how I got started, and it was recommended to me to go with Victron. I now know why that was the recommendation. As far as the end user, you guys, you can't go wrong with Victron. It's compatible across the board with everything in your entire system, as long as you, of course, if most of it is Victron, your solar controllers are going to communicate with your inverters, and your servo is what brings all of this stuff together. And I'm trying not to get into a lot of detail because we could go off down the proverbial rabbit hole, but nobody else in the industry can even come close to Victron as far as what it's capable of doing, how easy it is to get it set up, and basically it's like you can plug and play. You get it set up and running, and you never have to think about it again. With other equipment that I've seen while doing this, they aren't as user friendly. It's complicated to try to do the programming. Customer service is almost non-existent, and which is another thing too. Whether you come to us or you decide that you're doing your own installation yourself, you want to get your equipment direct from a dealer. You don't want to buy it. We'll use Amazon as an example, because if you go through an unknown seller to buy the equipment, which Amazon, there's nothing wrong with Amazon, but they're just the middleman. So if you're getting your equipment from an unknown seller, then who do you call when you have warranty work that you need to deal with, or if a piece of equipment fails, who do you call? So my recommendation is that you want to either get it from an installer / dealer, or just a dealer themselves to get your equipment from, because of that customer service relationship. So Victron is the way to go, guys. As far as batteries, I am a Battleborn and an Epoch battery dealer. Obviously, I'm going to recommend those two, but there's a lot of great batteries out there. I don't want to get into that whole caveat, but anyway, we could go on and on. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of them. In fact, I think, Jim, you have Li-ion batteries, and there's nothing wrong with Li-ion. I have some Re-Li-ons that we've installed. I've done Life Blues. I mean, you name it, we do it. And in fact, if you have your own equipment and you want someone like me to install it, well, I guess I can't speak for anybody, but for me, you're welcome to bring me your equipment, but I can't warranty your equipment if you're the one bringing it to me. If you get it from me, then of course it's going to come with that warranty.
And then solar panels are going to be restricted to how much real estate you've got on your roof.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah, that's the big one too, is that it's hard to have a roof full of solar and a place to walk, but it's hard to have a place to walk and also have enough solar to run your entire coach. And on an RV, you got to remember that real estate is everything, and that because we all have a bunch of stuff. So you run out of room really quick, and the RV roof is the exact same way. When you've loaded it up with solar panels, then before you know it, there's nowhere to walk. But you need all of that space that you can if you want to put enough panels up there to be able to charge that battery bank up that's going to provide the power to the inverters, that's going to give you the power that you're looking for. So it starts out as a want, and then it becomes a need. But the level is entirely on you guys. I mean, if you want to just get from this pedestal to this pedestal, and you just want it to stay charged up enough to keep your refrigerator going from A to B, that's easy. If you Want to do the harvest host overnight, just for one night, then you just need a moderately sized battery bank to get you there. If you want to be able to run air conditioning while you're at the harvest host location, now we've completely changed to a whole nother level. So that's where we get into the whole larger system upgrades.
So I got to thank Neil for spending some time with us. He's a busy guy, and he's taken this time out to hopefully answer some of your questions. I would highly recommend Neil or Chad.
Absolutely.
You know,
in fact, yes, Chad is in California, Lower Lake, California. So if you're in his area, by all means, reach out to Chad. I believe Chad's website is chadheiser.com. But if you got any questions, either of us can get you in contact with him. If you've got questions you'd like to ask me, then you can reach out to me. My website is nomadneil.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
And they're located, as I stated, in Elk City, Oklahoma. It's in western Oklahoma. And I tell people it is smack dab in the middle of the country. We always come through here to see Neil and Dawn, as well as rolling retreats on our way south from Montana. Even though if we're going west, it's just a little bit of a jaunt to go that way. If you're going down to Florida or the Gulf Coast, it's the same thing. It's just real easy access. They're just off of I-40. So
Absolutely. And keep in mind, as we said earlier, or I said, even if you can fly it and land it here, we'll work on it. So I say that so that you understand that it doesn't matter what kind of rig you have, whether it's a fifth wheel, a travel trailer, a Class C, even if you've got a Sprinter van, Class A's, it doesn't matter. If it has a DC system and an AC system, as far as the electric goes, we can pretty much increase your boondocking ability, for lack of better terms.
all right, guys, I am going to wrap this one up. And by the way, if you've got any questions that you want me to forward to Neil, put them in the comments below, and I'll make sure that he gets a response for us. So we're going to wrap this one up from Elk City, Oklahoma. Just remember, it all starts with an idea. Turn those ideas into reality. Make some memories. That's what life's all about. Thanks for coming along. God bless you all. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.